Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of Attlas Live. This is our week in review, as we have turned it into as of late, a recap of the topics that we discussed live Wednesday and Friday evening last week. And we hope that everyone had a good weekend, restful and enjoyable. We today already have spent much of the morning shoveling ourselves out of a rather significant snowfall. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a snowstorm, but there was significant drifting snow, and that made it much more dramatic than it otherwise would have been. And not only did we have to shovel the walk and the driveway and all that stuff, but we also had to pull snow off the roof, because it accumulates in snowdrifts and it becomes rather dangerous with the weight. So we did quite a lot of work this morning already. But having said that, it's time. We may as well start delving into the topics. Although here is the link. If you feel so inclined to jump on the stream, by all means, feel free to do so. If you have something you'd like to ask or contribute and you don't want to deal with the chat with typing, you're more than welcome to jump in on the live stream. According to StreamYards, there are two of us on the stream right now. Perhaps some more will join us a little later. Perhaps not. We'll have to see how that goes. But in the meantime, we may as well start getting into the first topic of this evening, which, as we try to get our there it is. All right. While we try to get ourselves organized with technology here, and we can hide this. Okay. On Wednesday, we decided to go a little bit deeper into our exploration of the film The Last Duel. That's Ridley Scott's latest film, starring Ben Affleck and Adam Driver and Matt Damon and Jodie Comer. Those are the four actors on the poster here. And we decided to do this in the context of Ridley Scott's other period films, because while they are great adventure stories and Ridley Scott went to great lengths to do his research and to hire historians and professional experts in order to achieve a maximum level of realism in his mind. He wanted to deliver films which had a historical authenticity to them. And that he did. Although so-called serious historians, of course, came out and attack most of his attempts at period drama for this inaccuracy and that inaccuracy. And so, in other words, there's no pleasing them. You can't please all the people all the time, no matter what lengths you go to. There's no agreement among historians as to what exactly took place and exactly, what things were exactly like. And of course, the reason why there's no agreement is that nobody was actually there. Not from among those historians here today, and none of them, practice esotericism in a serious way. So none of them have access to past lives or anything of that nature, or the Akashic records, or any super strong intuition for them to be able to say definitively, no, this was like this and that was like that. If they, and we can say that unequivocally, we can say that with fact. And the reason why we can say that is because to this day, canonical history, the official narrative of this humanity's history denies the existence of Atlantis and Lemuria and Hyperborea, etc. It denies the existence of giants. It denies the history of this planet, the history of humanities upon this planet. So it's easy to make the assertion that historians are asleep. Egyptologists' version of Egypt is incorrect. And so they're grasping in the dark. And then there are other individuals like Graham Hancock who come along and they sort of shake the trusses a bit with their, fingerprints of the gods, etc. Graham Hancock is an interesting fellow by the standpoint of he's on the fence between states of being asleep and being awake. And the reason why he can't get all the way over to awake is because because of his reliance on psychedelics and his belief in psychedelics and his belief in the power of psychedelics to unveil the truth. And that's why Graham Hancock cannot produce the definitive human timeline. All he can do is grasp at the straws that he's grasping, at the interpretations that he possesses, that are in part spurned on not only by his investigative journalism and investigative historical approaches, but also fueled on by his psychedelic experiences. If the historians were truly awake, then our view of the history of humanity on this planet would be very different indeed. So it's not surprising then that among a whole bunch of historians who are asleep, there's very little agreement as to what exactly took place and how it took place, et cetera, et cetera. And historians love tearing down each other's accounts because, of course, they must do so in order to defend their own account. Their own account of history is only as solid as the opposing accounts. So it's invariably an activity of intellectualism to constantly be attacking others' opinions and others' versions of the truth, because one must shore up and defend one's own beliefs. Sounds a lot like religion, does it not? And religious dogma. And incidentally, sounds a lot like political doctrine, political ideology. What it also represents in macrocosm, on the stage of intellectualism and history in particular, is that the ego mind, the false self, wants to accumulate. It wants accolades. It wants power. It wants control. And it specifically wants power and control over all of our faculties. Over our lands, if we can process the hume in human being means earth, then a human being in microcosm is the earth in microcosm. We have a physical body. That is our hume. That is our earth. But we also have a psyche. And we also possess energy, the sexual force, the vital body. And both our psyche and our sexual energy is predominantly feminine. And that is what the adversary covets the most. It wants to dominate and control our psyche. And it wants to consume, it wants to have our sexual energy. It wants to feed off of it and indulge itself through it. Not unlike a nobleman who is best friends with a knight in 14th century France. And you'll have to forgive me if I cannot remember the names. I'm so terrible with names at the best of times. I'm not going to remember the names of a squire and a knight from 14th century history in a film that I watched once. So I'm not going to remember. I will use the actors' names because at least I've seen them in multiple films and I can place a name of the face. But their original character names, I'm not going to use those because, in all fairness, if you haven't seen the film, you won't know, what we're talking about. But at least, even if you've seen the trailer and you have a general idea of what the film is about, you'll be able to place the actor's face to the name and get a sense of what's going on, even just based on the trailer. So let's see where we're going with this in terms of the... oh yes, this is just a slide that's showing various characters from various of Ridley Scott's films. So The Last Duel. We have a knight who is married to the character of Jodie Comer. And she's here. And he has a very good friend in Adam Driver. Adam Driver is only a squire. He hasn't been knighted yet. But they have had a relationship, a friendship, Matt Damon and Adam Driver. But Adam Driver falls under the influence and into the employ of Ben Affleck's character. And Ben Affleck plays a lord, the lord of that particular part of France. Province, I guess, might be one way to refer to. But of course, this is feudal Europe. So each nation was carved up into different territories. And then different noble families or houses held control over those territories, governance, if you will, and they were responsible for collecting the taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So the influence under the influence and in the employ of Ben Affleck, Adam Driver, his demeanor and his character, let's say, is allowed to express some of its more insidious and darker aspects. And over the course of events, Matt Damon goes on a military campaign in the north, in Normandy, and Ben Affleck goes and pays a visit to his wife. And the result of this visit is that Jodie Comer, Matt Damon's wife, accuses Adam Driver of having raped her. At this time in history in Europe, women were not considered persons, strictly speaking. They were in many ways little more than chattel under the law. They were the property first of their fathers, then of their husbands. So legally, this was a violation of Matt Damon's property. And therein lies the crux of the esoteric significance of the dynamic between Matt Damon, the rightful, lawful owner of the lands, and his psyche and his sexual force, the feminine aspects of his self, and Adam Driver, the false self, who arranges or waits for Matt Damon to be absent, for the true self, for the consciousness to be absent, and to leave unguarded his most precious possession, his sexual force and his psyche. And that is what happens when our mind wanders, when we fall asleep, when we zone out. We become vulnerable. We become vulnerable to the false self to come and take advantage and to indulge its self on our most precious faculties. Hello there, Jamie. Welcome.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Glad you could join us. Let's see if we can reorient everything here to make it. There we go. Well, yes, okay. So there's two other characters that come into play here. One is Ben Affleck's character, who's the lord of the land that both Matt Damon and Adam Driver are residents on and work on. So, but he's a very douchey kind of character. He's a real typical medieval spoiled, lustful drunkard on top of everything else. And rest assured that Ben Affleck plays a damn good drunk on screen, considering that he's unfortunately lived probably most of his adult life suffering from alcohol addiction. That character represents the ego, the adversary, that has this influence over Adam Driver and convinces Adam Driver that he is his friend, and he needs Adam Driver. Hello, Azazel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. Glad you could join us. So this is an interesting dynamic here because because Adam Driver's faculties and abilities, for example, he's good with numbers. Another thing he's good at is intimidating the lords and landowners, the nobility, but the lower nobility, the ones who have to answer to Ben Affleck. Adam Driver serves Ben Affleck as a tax collector and as an accountant and financier. So not only does he help Ben Affleck, in other words, Adam Driver is the muscle and the intellect. And if you just contemplate your own self and contemplate how your egos, for example, any ego, envy, greed, how greed, for example, and envy or anger, as another example, contemplate how they are nothing. They're useless.
Yeah.
They cannot accomplish anything without the faculties of your intellect and the faculties of your strength, your physical strength.
Yeah.
If your anger wants to punch somebody in the face, he can't do that without your muscle, right?
No.
And if your greed wants to accumulate, he can't do that without your intellect. So this is the relationships, the dynamics between these different characters so vividly capture the power struggle that is taking place within a single being. There is a fifth character. Now, this is a double-edged sword, because how do you depict a childlike king in a serious way? It's very difficult to do. So the first thing you do is you kind of minimize his screen time. You don't want to turn him into a buffoon, but at the same time, this is not Richard the Lionheart who's sitting on the throne right now. Right now, this is France anyway, so it wouldn't be Richard the Lionheart anyway. But you get our meaning.
Yeah.
He's not some magnificent, powerful, majesty monarch. This is a young, sniveling child, prepubescent, postpubescent. It's vague. He's not a man. He's a boy. But Matt Damon answers to him. Matt Damon serves him, his king, which is the Lord of Lords. In other words, Matt Damon serves the Logos. Matt Damon, being the true self, serves the Logos. And Ben Affleck, who presumes to lord over the land and presumes to take Adam Driver as his best friend and steals him away from Matt Damon and drives a wedge between the two of them so as to keep Adam Driver all to himself and isolate Matt Damon from court, for example. Matt Damon falls out of favor. Matt Damon is not friendly with Ben Affleck. Matt Damon despises him in a way. He thinks he's disgusting and lewd. So it's a very, very, very interesting dynamic. And then there's another interesting thing that takes place in The Last Duel, which is the narrative structure. The film is told in 3 equal parts. It's a 3-act structure, as most films are, as most drama is, 3-act structure, beginning, middle, end. But like the Akira Kurosawa film Rashomon, the film depicts the same story told by 3 different from 3 different points of view in each of those 3 acts. So you have Matt Damon's perspective in Act 1, you have Adam Driver's perspective in Act 2, and then you have Jodie Comer's perspective in Act 3. The alleged rape victim. You get to see her side of the story last. And each one is, about 45 minutes long, maybe 50 minutes long. And many of the parts of the story we get to see repeated. Only this time we're seeing it from a slightly different point of view. And apparently, according to what we have researched into the film and that the book that the film is based on actually researched the original accounts by each of these characters, by each of these individuals, these historic individuals. So such that, yes, it's dramatized, of course. So there are aspects that are not, completely known to have taken place. However, based on first hand testimony and things like journals and memoirs and such, and court documents themselves, because at the end of the day, in Act 3, the film culminates in a court case, in a trial. And in that trial, Jodie Comer, even though she is the one accusing the nobleman, Adam Driver, of rape, she is every bit on the defense. She is the defendant, in fact. Because if she is found to be guilty, she will be put to death by being burned at the stake. That's the punishment for falsely accusing a nobleman. So the stakes are very, very, very high. And the so high that someone there is voicing his disdain at the at the high stake.
Sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. All right. So, okay. So that's Jodie Comer, and that's her with Matt Damon. This is just a behind the scenes photo. Of course, there's Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is 83 years old now. 83 years old. So he's as old as my father. And I can tell you, there's no way my father could survive a movie set. So there is a very, very good chance that The Last Duel is Ridley Scott's last film. It's a very, very, very good chance that that's the case. And it's a pity that the film did not do as well in the movie theaters as it could have and should have, because for us anyway, it is every bit as significant a work as Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven. Every bit is esoteric, and every bit is divinely inspired, as those two films were. Apparently, you can watch it now on HBO Max, but I don't know what that means for you folk in Europe. But certainly, you must be able to see it on some form of streaming or whatever. So if you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend you to watch it.
Last night I tried to watch it online on a website, but I had issues trying to stream it.
Oh yes. Well,
but I'll keep trying.
It's certainly a challenge, especially if you use like these IPTV services, because we have such a service as well, and it's very. These services, it depends on how many people are using them. There's all sorts of factors that come into play. HBO Max is the only legitimate streaming service where you can watch it right now, and there you probably wouldn't have any difficulty because it's a commercial or legitimate commercial streaming service. But perhaps in the near future you'd be able to watch it on Google or Amazon Prime, or who knows. But whenever you get a chance, we won't spoil the film necessarily, not least because we have more content. We have a lot more to get through today. But at least we set it up for you, that as you watch the film, You can enjoy it on the level of history. You can enjoy it on the level of seeing these events through the lens of the 21st century, and that we recognize today that women are not chattel, they're not property. And so a lot of the absurdism, which was so prevalent in the propaganda film, right? Don't Look Up. That propaganda film used satire to create absurdism, to highlight what it was trying to say. But Ridley Scott doesn't have to use any satire or propaganda, and indeed, he doesn't browbeat us with anything in this film. He gives us the space to arrive at our own conclusions. So much so that he gives us each 3 different perspectives, and he puts them more or less almost on equal footing. And and it's the hindsight is 2020, and it's from that lens that we look back on history and we see the absurdity. And some of the absurdity, for example, when the bishops in the church who are conducting the trial start talking about known scientific facts. And when they start talking about what some of these scientific facts are, you can't help but start laughing because of the absurdity of what they believed to be scientific fact back in the Middle Ages, in the 14th century.
Yeah.
But these scientific facts were being brought to bear on the trial and on the fate of this young woman as though it was forensic evidence. And it's absurd. It really is absurd, but it's also unnerving, and you know, it's cause enough to make someone step back and take pause and say, well, I wonder what kind of scientific errors are being made today in courtrooms. I wonder who is being prosecuted and found guilty on erroneous forensic evidence. And interestingly enough, if you were to look into forensic scientists and forensic experts, behind closed doors and off the record, they will tell you that forensic evidence is not an exact science. That what
No,
they
it's
do
not.
that they do has so much supposition and so much guesswork and so much they make so many assumptions and educated guesses, and now we imagine that if someone was called to do this work and they feel deep down in their heart that they were born to be a forensic examiner, then surely intuition must also play a role. But if they are asleep, if they're not on the path, and they certainly don't talk openly about intuition and gut feeling. Instead, their intellect will morph that into comments about educated guesses, or, well, you know, based on experience, based on, you know, they will try to justify and rationalize, because of course you can't get up in front of a judge and say, you know, when the judge asks you, well, how do you know? Or when a lawyer asks you, well, are you sure about this? And you say, yes, because it's a very strong intuition. I mean, that's not admissible in a court of law. It should be.
Yeah.
It should be, but it's not, because everybody else in the courtroom is asleep. So, but in any case, we have a couple articles on Gladiator that are on our blog. Gladiator Unmasked, Part 1 and Part 2. And what we see here is the tree of life and the various different characters mapped onto it from Gladiator. And when this came to us, it was such a profound insight. It was Shakespearean in the elevation. But we always knew Gladiator was, certainly at that point, Ridley Scott's masterpiece. We had been a fan of Ridley Scott for a long, long time, going all the way back to Alien and Blade Runner and Legend. And if you've never seen Legend, it's a magical, it's a fairy tale. Ridley Scott created a fairy tale. Original characters, well, be based on what European, I guess, fairies and so on and so forth. But he also created in Legend in my opinion, and we don't watch horror movies, so let's be clear about that. We don't watch horror movies, but in the character of Darkness that was portrayed by Tim Curry, Ridley Scott created the most compelling vision of a demon or the devil that has ever been put on film. The scenes with Tim Curry as Darkness, the costuming, the makeup, the voice, the performance, but the characteristics of Darkness as a persona, as a character, it's a magical movie, right? I mean, you have to put some of your internal movie critic on the back burner, because the protagonist is played by a very young and inexperienced Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise was a poor casting choice for this film. He plays Jack, and surely they could have found someone better. But so for all his faults, he does the best he can. And we can't remember the name of the actress who plays Lily, but she is innocent. And Darkness desires innocence. He wants to corrupt her. He wants to make Lily, who's this innocent, virgin young girl, Darkness wants to make her his bride. And the other thing that Darkness desires for his master, because Darkness has a master lurking in the background, that we never really get any sort of real sense. It's very much a sort of Darth Vader emperor type relationship, where there's this greater evil force in the background, and Darkness is sort of his front man. But Darkness has been charged by his master with the task of killing the unicorn that runs free in the forest, and taking the power of the unicorn, which is in the unicorn's horn. And there's a absolutely brilliant scene when so Darkness is tasked with winning over Lily, making Lily his bride. And he says, well, how am I supposed to do that, right? And he says, oh, well, woo her, charm her. And then there's these, so there are these scenes with Darkness, who's 8 feet tall, Tim Curry made up as this hooved demon with these incredible horns, these just colossal horns. Just if you do you know what, we have to show you, if you've never seen this, it's an absolute remarkable achievement in movie makeup. Let's see if we can get a good picture here. There we go. Can we pull that up? Do you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that in the actual thing before through a mirror.
Through a mirror?
Yeah.
You've seen it, you looked into the mirror and you've seen this. Okay. All right. But what none of these do justice, and I can't play you a clip because I don't want the stream to get doxed by Google. But better stop that. Okay, so his voice and his acting and everything else. So imagine like that character, this character here, but being so charming and being so seductive, and you get an idea of the performance that was on screen. If you get a chance, you should be able to find Legend. You might even be able to find most of it on YouTube, to be honest with you, because it certainly wasn't a like many of Ridley Scott's films in the 80s, both Blade Runner and Legend, neither of them were box office successes. It's only over time that Blade Runner became a cult classic and Legend became another cult classic, because it whatever it lacked in attracting the masses, it has for those who can feel or see or sense what is special about his films. And likewise, Ridley Scott said the same thing about The Last Duel. He said, it didn't do well in the box office, but he said he feels that history is going to be very kind to The Last Duel as well. That time will be very kind to it. Now, Gladiator was a different story. Gladiator did very well at the box office. And one of the reasons why it did so well was because it had these relationships between the characters, whereby each character represented something, but not just the characters, but also the settings. Every setting in the film can be mapped onto the Tree of Life. And if you want to spend more time with these are in our articles that are online on the blog. Gladiator 1 and Gladiator Unmasked 1 and 2. These are in those articles. And we've talked about this in the past, that in many properties, in fact, all high art and all mythology, you can perform this exercise. Is that the individual characters on the stage, on the screen, in the novel, what have you, represent different aspects of a single psyche. And that the connection with the piece, with the story, and with the characters comes from this fact, is that high art performs this function because we are a tree of life. And for something to speak to us, it must do for us what Azazel just commented a moment ago. It must be a mirror for us.
It wasn't Jamie, actually.
It was
me.
It was Jamie.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was Jamie. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to see. It's hard for me to tell who's speaking at any time. Okay, so
Yeah.
Jamie said that he saw it in a mirror. So every time we see a property or mythology or story, and because of the characters are mapped onto a tree of life this way, it speaks to our very soul. This is how it's speaking to our soul, our being, because the tree of life is inside of us. And so what makes something universal? So for example, the Lion King, well, people have commented very often that the Lion King is simply an animated version of Hamlet. So is it surprising that the characters in the Lion King map onto the tree of life? Because the characters in Hamlet certainly do. So if you follow Euclid's equation, if two things are equal to one thing, then they are equal to each other. And the connection that people feel towards art is on this level. This is the level that people love something. They love Star Wars, or they love Gladiator, or whatever the case may be. It's on this level, because that's where love comes from. The problem is, of course, is that we have this ego mind and this intellect that loves to filter our love and twist it and corrupt it and modify it, subject it to its desires. And because we're asleep, and most people can't see this, what they feel inside intuitively, they have to rationalize and justify somehow for themselves. So they start making up excuses for the film. People ask, you say, "Oh, I loved Gladiator." "Oh, really? What did you love about it?" And they're put on the spot, and right? They can't say, "Well, I love the fact that all the characters map onto the tree of life." No, but they can't say that. They don't know that. They don't know that. They can't say to answer that. And the peer person who's asking, the person they're talking to, would probably have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Even if they did know that. So they got to come up with something. "Oh, well, the acting was so good, and the action was so good, and the writing was so good, and the cinematography was so good, and blah, 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 blah." And then boom, Gladiator wins 10 Academy Awards. But that's not what made Gladiator Gladiator. This is what made Gladiator Gladiator. All of things like this, for example. This is the tree of life and the caduceus of Mercury emblazoned on Maximus's armor. The tree of life is right on his armor in the middle. But it's interesting because we also have Maximus's wife and his son, his divine mother and his innermost intimate Christ, right? Who is the product, who was born of how we use our intimate connection with our own divine mother, our sexual force, from which rises the Christ, the divine masculine and divine feminine, uniting and giving rise to the divine androgen, the fire of the fire and the light of lights of the cosmic Christ. That's Maximus's son. Now we have a little bit of an inversion here because the horses are at the top and we have these two griffins at the bottom. So the wings of the caduceus of Mercury are at the bottom, not at the top. That's somebody's design issue. But the reason why the horses are on top is because Maximus is a Spaniard. And the Andalusian horses of Spain are world famous, and that's what, Maximus, this is part of his character. So now there's another reason why they have to be up top. And that is because these are actually Maximus's horses. Maximus can't have griffins, right? right? Maximus can't say, well, these are my griffins, because, you know, that's a mythological creature. But he can say, these are my horses, Argento and Scato. And always forget, there's an important significance to those names. And we should have remembered to pull this up beforehand. So is it this one or the second one? No, it's... So the name of Maximus's horses, Argento and Scato, are okay. Scarto is his... Argento is silver. Okay. All right. So Argento and Scarto are his horses. Argento is silver. Silver is feminine, related to the moon. And Scarto means to ride out. It's the active force of riding out. So Scarto is masculine. And they are Maximus's horses. So they are on either side of the tree of life. So they are Ida and Pingala. They are Jacquin and Boaz, the two pillars of the tree of life. Because they carry Maximus. And Maximus is willpower. Maximus, that's all heroes, all protagonists in all high art, in all mythology, are always willpower. They are always the human soul, as we can see in the Tree of Life here. Maximus is, they're always in the center of the Tree of Life. So somebody designed the armor this way, and it comes out of the script, the way it was written, that Maximus is pointing to these two horses and saying, this is Argento and this is Scarto. Somebody somewhere who wrote the screenplay either unconsciously or consciously did this. Those are the only two options. But if you did it unconsciously, that means something did it through him. Because this is no accident. This armor, just like all the characters mapping onto the Tree of Love, Tree of Life, that is no accident. It's divinely inspired. It's high art. It's mythology.
It's very interesting to think that divinity can work through someone who's still unconscious, you know?
It is interesting, but remember that people are compelled. Even if you ask them, they will not tell you. They cannot tell you where or how or why they did something. All they can tell you is, I just knew I had to do it this way. It just came to me. And if they take credit for it, well, I'm the smart one. Oh, yeah, it came to me. But they can't tell you where it exactly came from. They can't. So they'll take credit for it. It's the ones who really know themselves and observe themselves will tell you that, for example, Mozart in the film Amadeus, and we have an article on Amadeus, by the way, and that is a fantastic, another absolutely fantastic film, and another piece of high art. But there, we see two different characters. And again, like the Last Duel, we have Salieri and Mozart And Salieri is envious of Mozart. Why? Because Mozart is God's chosen vessel, God's chosen vehicle. And Salieri becomes incensed. He becomes livid with anger and envy. Why? Why would God choose that sniveling, obscene little child to be his messenger? It's such a genius, brilliant personification of the false self, of the ego, who covets, right? The ego is envious. The ego covets. And the most exhilarating or vivid, tangible way that one can represent covetousness is from the sixth commandment? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. That's in the 10 Commandments because it's such a big deal, right? To adultery, to desire another man's wife. That's a big deal. That's the most sacred connection that he has. For you to desire that, to desire to take that away. And Salieri, he does not have an affair with Mozart's wife, nor any of Mozart's mistresses, but he covets all of them, and he uses and he manipulates them in order to bring Mozart down, to bring about Mozart's demise. Salieri is always plotting to bring Mozart down in the same way that the false self and the villains in stories are always plotting to cause the hero to fall. So that's Scarto and Argento, the Ida and Pingala. Commodus in Gladiator, Commodus, the name means desirous. Why Marcus Aurelius, who is basically one of the fathers of Stoicism, he was a philosopher, and to this day you can read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and it's still today relevant and worthwhile and valuable 2,000 years later. And why he would name his son Commodus, I'll never know. But Commodus means desirous. So Commodus is desire. He is the ego. And of course, Commodus desires nothing more than the throne. He wants to be emperor. That's all he wants. That's all he cares about. And he'll do just about anything to do it, including murder Marcus Aurelius. And Marcus Aurelius is the innermost being. He is the one that Maximus serves. And not only that, Marcus Aurelius says to him in the tent, he says, "You are the son I should have had." And he also says to Maximus, I will when I'm gone, I want you to be protector of Rome and to hold in trust that power until the Senate is ready to rule again. I'm going to be the emperor that gives back Rome's true self. All of this language, all of this dialogue, all of these exchanges, they're barely veiled, right? They're barely veiled. Rome is a macrocosm of a single being, right? Rome in macrocosm, to give back Rome's true self. And Marcus Aurelius wants Maximus, who is willpower, he who leads the army. He has the whole force of the military behind him. And it's Maximus who defeats the barbarians, which of course also represent the wildness, the animals, right? And Maximus is a Spaniard who raises horses. Maximus, who is a horse whisperer. He has tamed his animal self. His horses Argento and Scotto, his Ida and Pingala. Maximus as a Spaniard. He's a master of Andalusian horses. He's willpower. And so the innermost being, our Marcus Aurelius, hands the throne of Rome to hold in trust to the human soul, to willpower. Commodus doesn't like that, right? He is envious of Maximus. And soon after Commodus learns of his father's plans, he promptly murders Marcus Aurelius and assumes his place. It's exactly what the false self does. It's exactly what the demons are here to do. To cause our innermost emperor, our inner lord, to be out of the picture so that it can now sit on the throne. And what's the first thing our egos go after? After they've blocked or caused our innermost being to be pushed out of the picture, as soon as our egos get on the throne of power, get into a position of power, it's the first thing they go after. You should be able to answer this from your own experience. What happened in the Garden of Eden? What did the serpent do?
Seduced Adam and Eve.
That's right, temptation. And what faculty is challenged by temptation?
Willpower.
Exactly. It's Maximus. Commodus says, ride out till dawn and execute him. As soon as Commodus gets power, he's got to get Maximus out of the picture. He's got to get willpower out of the picture. He's got to kill willpower. As soon as the ego gets into a position of power in us, immediately comes a desire, a temptation, a seduction, a whatever, which is immediately attacking our willpower.
Yeah.
Just observe yourself, right? When that craving comes or when that depression comes or whatever, immediately you want to, I don't know, grab a bag of Doritos or whatever the case may be, or light up a cigarette or whatever. But you know, if you observe yourself, if you're fine and everything's perfectly, you're at peace, and all of a sudden, this overwhelming craving comes over you.
Yeah, my willpower has basically been inverted at times. So yeah, I know.
Right? So all of this in Gladiator takes place in the span of 15 minutes into the film?
Yeah.
Right? You have Maximus, fighting the Germanic barbarians, right? And then you have this beautiful exchange, and then this is all happening. This is all like in the first act of the film, covering all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
it's setting up so beautifully. There is so much in Gladiator that we wrote 2 articles, and we still haven't finished everything that we could be talking about Gladiator. The reason why we stopped writing Gladiator is because it's like we realized we're not writing blog articles anymore. We're writing a book. There is so much. It's like, you know what? We're just going to put it on hold now. We put it on the back burner, and it's going to be like, someday written like what Samael wrote about, Tristan and Isolde and the other operas by Wagner. This is the level. This is the level at which these films are constructed.
Yeah, in regards to that temptation, I basically remember something that Samuel wrote about the Black Temples as well, being very clean, being very convenient in every single way possible. I mean, cleanliness is not something that you can compare to those temples, to the physical realm. I mean, no matter how well I clean my own house or apartment, it's no way near those temples that you would see in the astral realm.
So yes, very inviting.
Yes,
Right?
it is.
And isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? Certainly, even today, because we've had the ability to travel, not super extensively through Europe or the rest of the world, but we've traveled enough to know that when it comes to ease of access, ease of accessibility, the easiest, most accessible food, for example, is the worst food for us. It's the easiest to get. Even in Japan, where we lived, there are vending machines for alcohol. On every corner, they have beer and wine and sake vending machines everywhere. Now, admittedly, it gets pretty hot in Japan, so the argument is, well, you need a refreshing drink. So you can be, it's hilarious. You can be out in the middle of nowhere in Japan, like literally in the wilderness in Japan, and you'll come across a vending machine that has cold drinks in it, and you'd be like, it's not plugged into anything. You don't know it, but it's ice cold drinks coming out of it. It's some voodoo witchcraft that the Japanese have. But
nice.
But it's surreal. Or when we went to Spain, it's like that in Spain too. When we went to we were in the south of Spain. We were in Valencia, and yeah, it's like everywhere you go, and then. Or it's a surreal thing. You go to Guatemala or these places, and then you look at, you come across a Kentucky Fried Chicken, or you're in Valencia, Spain, and you come across a Taco Bell, and you think to yourself, why is there a Taco Bell in Spain of all places? But there is, right? So as above, so below. If the easiest, most accessible, most convenient things to us here in this world are the things that are the worst for us, then it is so in the supernal worlds, and all we got to do is observe our psyche to know this. This is, of course, the exchange of this is a beautiful moment when Marcus Aurelius offers Maximus the throne, and he asks Maximus, "Do you not accept this great honor?" And then Maximus says, "With all my heart, no." And he grabs Maximus and he says, "Don't you see, Maximus, that is why it must be you." Right? Because you don't want it. That's why it has to be you. Because you're so loyal and humble and simple, and you have no desire. You're
desireless.
You're not commodus. Right? You're not desirous. It's only those who are not desirous, who are humble. We have to be free of desire to be given the keys to the kingdom. Because really, that's what Marcus Aurelius is handing over, the keys to the kingdom, the power, right? So that's why it's willpower, because it's the will of the being handed over to the human soul. But it's power. There is so much going on. But Maximus has another mentor in the film, a mentor who has come before him, a mentor who's all his knowledge, all his wisdom, all the information that he gives Maximus, and indeed the armor that he gives Maximus to wear, comes from Proximo. Now, Proximo, the name, relates to proximity, closeness, that which is close in proximity. Proximo used to be a gladiator. Proximo won his freedom. And he is the one who instructs Maximus on how to become magnificent. He says, "You're good, Spaniard, but you're not that good. You could be magnificent." And he explains to Maximus what Maximus must do in order to do that. And he describes, the Colosseum and everything else. And it's this absolutely wonderful scenes with Oliver Reed is the actor's name. Oliver Reed died suddenly and tragically while this movie was being filmed. But thank God they got enough on camera with him so that they didn't have to reshoot his scenes with a different actor, because the chemistry and and Oliver Reed, you may know, was also in the film Spartacus, which was also about gladiators and also about slaves and fighting for freedom, et cetera, et cetera. And Oliver Reed played alongside oh gosh, the actor's name eludes me right now. Not coming to my mind. In any case, he's a brilliantly written character, but he represents the consciousness, because the consciousness is closest to the causal body, willpower.
Yeah.
On the tree of life, and consciousness is what we need. We need the information. We need the knowledge that comes through consciousness in order to succeed in the Colosseum, in order to win the crowd. And why do we need to win the crowd? And we learn this in the scenes of the senators. Senator Gracchus and the other senator are talking, and they're talking about Commodus and how Commodus has decided to commemorate the death of his father, Marcus Aurelius, with 180 days of games. And the one senator, he says, "Do you think the people are going to be seduced by that?" And Gracchus says, "I think he knows what Rome is. Rome is the mob. Conjure magic for them, right? And they will follow you, right? Take away their freedom and still they war." He said, "The bleeding heart of Rome is not the marble of the Senate. It is the sand of the Colosseum. The beating heart of Rome is in the sand of the Colosseum." And Proximo tells Maximus that he must win the crowd. Win the crowd, and you will win your freedom. The mob. There is something about the Colosseum and the lifeblood, the pulse, the people, the mob in the Colosseum, which is what Maximus must win over, must become a master of, if he is to defeat Commodus and win his freedom and return Rome to her true self, which is the will of Marcus Aurelius, the being, the true emperor of Rome. So we have another representative of the egos, or the sexual force, right? The beating heart of Rome is the Colosseum, and it's in the sand in the Colosseum. Well, what is in the sand of the Colosseum if not the blood? The blood that is shed for the mob, for the amusement of the mob. That's why the Colosseum exists. And it's interesting because not just the Colosseum, but next to the Colosseum in Rome was what was called the Circus Maximus. And here we have the character of Maximus. So because I am nothing, I am a slave with no more power than that to amuse the mob. And Lucilla says to him, "But that is power. The mob is power. The mob is Rome. And so long as Commodus controls them, he controls everything. But today I saw a slave become more powerful than the emperor of Rome." That was the scene when, following Maximus's fight with Tiberius, the gladiator who comes out of retirement to fight Maximus, and there's this absolutely, I mean, the imagination is just in awe of the scene of Maximus fighting with that gladiator, Tigress of Gaul, and the tigers are in the Colosseum, and Maximus must fight Tigress of Gaul, but he also must evade the tigers and everything else. It's a beautifully shot, beautifully played out scene. But then at the end, when Maximus defeats him, and he turns to Commodus, as is tradition, where the emperor is going to give the thumbs up or thumbs down, the emperor gives the thumbs down. Commodus does, because everybody in the mob is showing thumbs down, and so Commodus must give in to the mob. And then Maximus, he's about to cut off his head, but he throws down the axe. Right, so he's defied the emperor, which is, gladiators would never do this. Right, so he's acting in, but someone in the mob yells out, "Maximus, Maximus, the Merciful," and everybody cheers.
Yeah.
So it's this. There's this. What is happening here? There's so much stake. It's so big. Rome is the world. Rome is the known world. So, but that's a backdrop. That's an allegory, a symbol for the incredible struggle and the dynamic for power in our Rome, and the fight to restore Rome to her true self. All of this is playing out in the film. And it's so brilliantly executed as a film, the acting and the directing and everything else, is that it elevates all of those filmmaking elements, are elevated to reach and match and be worthy of the incredibly deep and powerful mythology that is at the heart and soul of that film. Which brings us to Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah, I've seen that one too.
Now, have you seen the theatrical release or the director's cut?
Probably the latter.
Probably the latter. Okay, because it's the director's cut is much better.
Yeah,
there's more than 20 minutes that was cut out of the film. The theatrical release was rushed. I mean, it feels really rough. They have done this to Ridley Scott many times in the past, where, for example, Blade Runner, there was the theatrical release. They've always, the producers and the studios have always like second guessed Ridley Scott's filmmaking, and his director's cuts are usually the best. But with Kingdom of Heaven, we have the story of Balian, who's a blacksmith, and Balian has a motto above his carved into his blacksmith shop: "What man is a man who does not leave the world better?" And Liam Neeson plays Balian's father, a lord, the Lord of Ibelin, and he returns from the Holy Land to France to it's not France, it's England. He returns to England to reclaim his son, because his son is illegitimate. He's a bastard, basically. And he convinces Balian to return to Jerusalem with him. And because Balian's wife gave birth to their stillborn son. She fell into melancholy. She killed herself. Balian's in mourning. He has nothing left to live for, and he has a really, really douchebag of a brother who's a priest who pisses him off to the point where he ends up murdering him. So Balian gets on a horse and starts running after his father and decides he's going to go to Jerusalem. And he asks his father, he asks Liam Neeson, in Jerusalem, is it true that I can atone for my sins and the sins of my dead wife? And Liam Neeson says, we can find out together. And in the course of events, Godfrey, which is Balian's father, the Lord of Ibelin, he makes Balian a knight. So he knights him. And Balian must give an oath. And the oath that he gives is, be brave in the face of your enemies. Be upright so that God may love thee. Speak the truth always, even if it leads to your death. That is your oath. And he slaps Balian across the face, and that is so you remember it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's just so brilliantly written, and it's so viscerally felt.
Yeah.
And you realize there it is. Like, anybody on the path knows what that feels like.
Yeah.
Right? We haven't been in a dark chamber, maybe necessarily taking such an oath and getting slapped across the face, but our Divine Mother has slapped us across the face enough times, reminding us of our oath. So again, we are in the realm of high mythology. We are in the realm of esotericism. We are in the realm of initiation, of nobility, the noble path, the path of righteousness, the path of God, to be a servant of God, a holy warrior. That's what a knight, a paladin, really is. It's the same what a samurai was in Japan, a warrior monk. That's what, certainly, and we run into more characters like this. Here on the right, we have the Hospitaller, who is literally a warrior monk. He's taken a vow of celibacy. He is a physician. He is a scholar, but he is a bona fide monk. He's a priest, essentially, but he's taken up the sword. He's taken up the sword of crusade. And he is, in many ways, a borderline mythological character in the film. He appears out of nowhere to instruct Balian, especially in times of hardship. He appears out of nowhere after Balian is attacked in the desert. He comes and he just appears out of nowhere, and his hand comes down. He just touches Balian on the temple, and Balian wakes up, and the Hospitaller is nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
Some have surmised and theorized that the Hospitaller is a figment of Balian's imagination. But of course, they have to rationalize that because they cannot comprehend Kingdom of Heaven as a mythology. That it's set in a historical context, but like Gladiator, it's high art, it's mythology. It's like Shakespeare, and ghosts come and go from off and on the stage in Shakespearean plays all the time with no explanation.
Yeah.
No justification. Just all of a sudden, the ghost of Hamlet's dad shows up. Yeah. Hey, how you doing, Hammy? I got something to tell you. And then he leaves again.
Yeah.
Right? And where do we see that happen? We see that happen in Star Wars, where the ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi all of a sudden starts whispering to Luke, or shows up in this etheric form, this Force ghost, they call them in Star Wars. And again, No explanation, no setup, no preparation, no scientific anything, explaining how or why and when and so forth.
Yeah.
So the Hospitaller is one of these characters, and in no uncertain terms, it is difficult in Kingdom of Heaven to map the characters precisely onto the Tree of Life, and that is because there are multiple characters that are assuming the same role. As one dies, another one replaces him. So
Yeah.
as Liam Neeson leaves the stage, who enters the stage? Before we get there, this is one of the Hospitaller's favorite quotes from the film is, "I put no stock in religion. By the word religion, I have seen the lunacy of fanatics of every denomination be called the will of God. I have seen too much religion in the eyes of too many murderers. Holiness is right action and courage on behalf of those who cannot defend themselves, and goodness. What God desires is here and here.
Yeah.
And what you decide to do every day will make you a good man or not, to be or not to be."
Yeah.
And spirituality versus religion and everything. So the Hospitaller is the whisperer of these truths, right, to Balian on these levels. And again, this is that scene where Balian throws the rock, makes a spark, the dry bush goes up in flames, and he says, "I did not hear it speak." There's your religion, there's your burning bush. And that's what the Hospitaller says. "I put no stock in religion," etc., etc.,
Hmm.
etc. We have another character here. This is the type. This is Tiberius. Tiberius, who is the basically the sheriff. The sheriff. He works for the king, and he's the sheriff of Jerusalem. And then we have the king himself. I don't know why these slides are advancing on their own. They should be. King Balian. And King Balian basically takes the place of Sir Godfrey and Balian. King Baldwin. King Baldwin takes the place of Godfrey in Balian's life as a father figure.
Yeah, this is my favorite scene.
Yeah, the scene of when he's talking about chess, right?
Yeah.
And all the worlds in chess and all that good stuff. And the quote is, "The whole world is in chess. Any move can be the end of you. Do anything except remain where you started, and you can't be sure of your end. Remember that howsoever you are played, or by whom, your soul is in your keeping alone. Even though those who presume to play you be kings or men of power, when you stand before God, you cannot say, 'But I was told by others to do thus,' or that virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice." Now, I personally, Edward Norton played King Baldwin.
Yeah.
And there is something about how he was able to play this character that's behind a silver mask
Yeah.
the entire time. But there's something about the way he was able to capture the physicality of a man who's dying of leprosy, but has the majesty of a king.
Yeah.
He has the humility and weakness of a man dying of this disease, but he has the majesty and the confidence and the strength to be able to ride out to meet Salahuddin and face him off outside of Kirak.
Yeah.
It's just, this is when people fail to appreciate the art of acting as the sculpting of energy.
Yeah.
And this is such a, when so many actors nowadays and so many studios and directors, I don't know if you have noticed, but when they do these superhero movies like Spider-Man, for example,
Yeah.
the impulse of the director is for Spider-Man constantly to be taking off his mask, so that we can see Tom Holland's face or Andrew Garfield's face or whoever's playing Spider-Man. And it's this weakness of these directors and those actors that, well, if they can't see my face, they can't see what my emotions are. They can't see what I'm feeling. These people have never studied Kingdom of Heaven.
No.
They have never watched Edward Norton's performance here, heard his voice, listened to it, and realize, holy, this is, he's practically worthy of a supporting actor Oscar.
Yeah.
And we can't see his hands, we can't see anything. but this is and of course the chess thing, Master Samael writes so beautifully and lovingly and intelligibly about chess as a allegory for life and an allegory for the path.
Yeah.
And we've only touched the surface of it when we made our meme explaining the black pieces and the white pieces and the relationship, our relationship to them before we awaken, after, and through the process of awakening. But if you do a Google search for Samael Aun-Weor and chess, you will find all the various different things that he wrote and said about chess, and it will enlighten and enliven you to the power of that game. It is the perfect game.
Yeah.
It is perfection. It is in so many different ways. On Wednesday, we spoke at long length about chess, because we used to play chess. We used to be a chess prodigy. We used to play chess competitively as a child and as a preteen and teenager. There is so much poetry and drama and history and, again, and spirituality. Chess is truth.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. The weakest character on the board is what?
The pawn. Or the king, basically. Yeah. Sorry.
It's the king. Because the pawn has strength in numbers.
Yeah.
Right? You have 8 pawns. And pawns are very, very, very important. They're your foot soldiers. They're your they lead the charge, in fact.
Yeah.
Pawns and knights. But and then the strongest
The
piece
queen.
is the queen.
Yeah.
And that is, to a Gnostic, the most important aspect of oneself is one's divine mother.
Yeah.
The divine feminine force is everything to a Gnostic. Everything. Without that, try playing a game of chess without your queen.
Yeah.
That's what masters do, by the way, when they play weaker characters. When they play weaker players.
Yeah.
The chess master will take their queen off the board and play without their queen.
Yeah. And still win most of the time.
Yes, but at least it's their way of challenging themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all right, then we have, of course, the actual Queen of Jerusalem, and this is oh gosh, I cannot remember either the actress's name or her character's name.
Yeah, but I remember her from the movie as well.
Yeah. So, but there's the divine feminine, and through her, Guy de Lusignan takes power and becomes king. And Guy de Lusignan was not chosen by her, but was chosen for her, was imposed upon her. So Guy de Lusignan, he's one of those Templar fanatics. He represents the ego, the false self.
Yeah.
Who's married to the queen and takes and rules where he should not. And then, of course, we have Renaud de Chatignon, who's, I mean, he's a diabolical character, no doubt, but you can't help but love him as a character and how he was played and portrayed.
Yeah.
He's just this he's just a shit disturber. Like, just, he's one of these men that in a Dark Knight, was it in the Dark Knight, Alfred says to Bruce Wayne, he says, some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
That's Renaud de Chatignon. He just lives for bloodlust. And in many ways, you could say that he represents lust, or that, because he works for the false self, and then he brings about war, he brings about chaos. That's his job. That's his assignment, is to cause chaos.
Yeah.
Just and bring about the, this is when they're going on that raid. And we're getting on in time, so let's skip over the part about her son, who was also born leprous and puts him out of misery and whatever. Let's go straight to the Battle of Jerusalem. Now, here we have that interesting phenomenon where Balian says, we are fighting for the people, the souls inside. And we are not fighting to protect these walls. We are fighting to preserve and protect what's inside. And this is, when we think about the kingdom of heaven, see, this is the kingdom, Malkuth, the three-dimensional reality. This is our kingdom. And so we have a temple, we have walls, we have this physical phenomenon called our physical body, our temple. And the mob, or the heathen, right? The adversary, the enemies of God, if you will, okay, desire that temple for themselves. The human soul, the true self, fights not to preserve the walls, but to preserve the souls inside. So that's Balian. He's fighting for the kingdom of heaven, which is here and in here, and in what we choose to do every day, to be or not to be. So we brought this up in the context of, look at how, and maybe we are also partly guilty of this, look at how in the world, look at all the energy and effort and time and money that is spent on perfection of the physical body.
Yeah.
On being in this incredible physical shape. We have a friend, or a former friend from university, who is our age. So she's nearly 50 years old, or no, she's 50 years old because she's older than us by a year.
Mm-hmm.
And she does body sculpting. She's a mother of 3 children, we believe, if we're not mistaken. She has 3 kids, and she does body sculpting competitions. And there's no question. You see, she puts her photos on Facebook and whatnot from her competition.
Yeah.
There's no question about the sort of the body sculpting element of it. But again, in the context of the film that we're discussing, it's just as when Master Samael talks about people who take this thing called sport and they take it too far to the extreme.
Yeah.
It's who we are and what we should be fighting for is what is contained within these walls. The walls will age. The walls will crumble. We will all get old, and we will all get sick, and we will all deteriorate and die.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, we practice the rites of rejuvenation every single day, and we walk the path of the Bodhisattva, and we die and resurrect, and we learn the esoteric technique to be able to preserve the physical body like the pharaohs did. And there is a way to preserve the physical body, but I mean, there are very, 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 well, maybe not very, very, very few, but there's a handful of ascended masters who are on that path to be walking among the earth using that methodology. Count Saint Germain among them. But the thing about Count Saint Germain is that he's 3,000. He's been around for 3,000 years or over 3,000 years.
Yeah.
In the same physical body. So
yeah, but that is not up to us anyway.
Exactly.
Even if we get to that point.
Exactly. That's exactly the point that we're trying to make. Is that you're not going to get there by doing body sculpting or by doing by jogging, right? That's not how Count Saint Germain preserves his body.
Yeah.
So again, we have to before we can worry about the walls, we must worry about what's inside.
Yeah.
And there's Balian defending the walls against Salahuddin, who is leading the charge against city of Jerusalem. And Balian asks, "What is Jerusalem worth to you?" And Salahuddin says, "Nothing." He walks away and he turns around, everything.
Yeah.
Which is it's this beautiful moment of how should we say this? The all or nothing nature of the ego.
Yeah.
I want it all, or I don't want it at all.
Yeah, craving and aversion, yeah.
Craving and aversion, but also all or nothing. So the extremism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Encoded, but also the nonchalant, I don't care. I really don't care. But I have to do this. Yeah. I have to do this. I promised. The only reason why they made me king is because I promised to give them back Jerusalem. That's the only reason why Salahuddin is king.
Yeah.
Right? So he has to do it. It's his job. It's his job. In the grand scheme of things, Jerusalem's worth nothing. But in the here and now, it's everything. Because it's the only thing. It's like the ego is mechanical that way. And you observe the ego and it's that way. One moment, it wants the cheesecake. The next moment, I never want to see another cheesecake.
Yeah.
So there's so much, again, in this film. Not the same way as in Gladiator, where, everything can be clearly mapped onto the tree of life and everything. But it's a little bit more fluid and a little bit more fairy tale-ish, because the whole thing is very dreamlike. The film.
Yeah, I think that's why I actually like the movies, because I think the most beautiful of truths are basically those that cannot be mapped out, but need to be experienced. Because not all experiences is possible to describe in words, basically.
No, true. and this is again, there's so much dreamlike or surreal type things taking place. I mean, going back briefly, what just came into my mind. Can we see our innermost being? Can we see
Yeah,
our innermost
in
king?
that, yeah,
Right? Because he's covered. He's hidden.
yeah,
Right? He's moving the pieces. He can instruct us. He can talk to us. But he is shrouded, right?
yeah,
He is concealed.
yeah,
Our king is hidden from us. But we are charged to do his bidding. We are charged to be in his service. But we can't really see him. We just have an image of him, an icon of him, like the logos, right? We have this mask and these silk robes.
yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can't wrap this up. And the last slide we come to is Richard the Lionheart, who comes looking for Balian, the defender of Jerusalem. And Balian and his wife, they end up returning to Jerusalem with Richard the Lionheart crusading for to take back the kingdom of heaven, and there's a uneasy truce with Salahuddin, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah.
Eva Green, that's the name of the actress.
Yeah.
Eva Green. I still can't remember her character's name though. For heaven's sake.
Green as in green with 2 E's. Yeah.
Green as in the color green. Greene. That's the way we
Okay.
spell her name. Greene. Eva Green.
Yeah.
And okay. All right. That brings us to the we have been working on our book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that happened as we were working on our book was how can we write a book for normies, right? For those not on the path.
Yeah, that is quite a challenge.
and that is not intellectual on top of it. And what came to us was something that we feel everybody can relate to, because everywhere you go in the world, the puzzle is an activity and a toy which is almost a universal experience. If you tell people we're making a puzzle, most people will understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And most people will have made a puzzle at least once in their life.
Yeah.
And it is on that basis that came to us, and well, we're just going to start reading, and we're just going to start reading and sharing with you all that came to us in the process of, because the book that we're writing is about fear. It's an adaptation of our article about fear, and we have a working title, but we may not stick with it. We might have to go with something a little bit more catchy, because we have to make this saleable. We have to be able to make a splash with this book.
Yeah.
We have to be able to make an impact. We have to be able to shock this humanity into some sort of semblance of, maybe not everybody, but everybody, on the border, or people, and as we're facing the true global pandemic.
Yeah.
We actually
So I basically try to explain to people sometimes that life is their teacher, and they somewhat know what I'm talking about. But when it comes to the more subtle things, it gets really impossible.
the main okay, so I'm gonna start reading, and I'm gonna put this on the screen so you can read along.
Yeah.
But let's just go, and I'm not going to say anything about it because it should be self-explanatory. I may pause but if you would like me to pause, just let me know. Just say, just ask, I want to ask you a question, or if you have a comment or feedback, that's what we're looking for. Because right, but it's also very helpful to us to read this out loud, because then we hear it for the first time. We hear it so much, it becomes so much more crystallized in our consciousness. If we can see it and hear it, and when it's multimedia, when we're just reading it in our head on the page, it's so very like with blinders on. But when we are performing it, right, as you can see, we're very animated. We were on the stage. We belong on the stage. We believe in show and tell. That's why we talk about movies, and we try to use images, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we want to be able to invoke that same sort of multimedia experiential qualities in the writing process to create. And again, it should become self-explanatory. So what is ego? Typically, when we think of the word ego, we likely think of one or more definitions related to the I, the self, as defined by contemporary psychology, psychoanalysis, or philosophy. According to Google, that is Oxford Languages, a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. For example, a boost to my ego. The part of the mind that mediates between the consciousness and the unconsciousness, and is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. That is the psychoanalytical definition of ego. Or in metaphysics, the philosophical definition of ego, a conscious thinking subject. So these three constitute the contemporary understanding of what ego is. We will be using the word ego very differently in this book. We'll make clear precisely what we mean by ego, and support the assertion that the definition we are using is not only the original meaning of the word, but its true esoteric, that is, hidden nature. This definition and explanation will invariably challenge the contemporary materialist, secular, atheist definitions above. But once armed with the self-evident experiential knowledge of ego's true nature, which we can all seek and easily verify within our own consciousness, we will easily deconstruct the above erroneous definitions in due course, revealing their shortcomings, inaccuracies, and misrepresentations. The definition of ego we will work with shall prove infinitely more practical when it comes to facing the many faces of fear, especially when it comes to comprehending how and why fear behaves as it does, and by extension, how and why it makes us think and behave as we do while under its influence. To comprehend that definition, which is not arrived at via an intellectual process, but one of conscious contemplation and hands-on experience, we begin as one might begin any puzzle. Dump the pieces on the table, turn them all upright, and identify the corners which will frame an emerging, detailed, complete picture. Ego means I in Latin and is related with the word demon via demonstros, or demonstro, meaning I point out, origin of demonstrate, and demonium, meaning lesser or evil spirit, a parasitic metaphysical entity which causes suffering. Incidentally, point out is monstrare in Latin, and monster, monstrum. Before a demon, ego, I, can be found guilty, Latin sans, Old English sin, the etymology of sin, it must be demonstrated. The ego must be revealed. I point it out as a monster, the cause of suffering. In Christian mysticism, that means bearing witness to the revelation of the 7 deadly sins: fear, pride, greed, envy, gluttony, laziness, and the mother of all sins, lust, craving and aversion, lust for power, lust for fame, lust for fortune, etc. What bears witness to and can testify against the causes of suffering, proving them sinful, guilty, is consciousness, but only if that consciousness is illuminated. Demons, monsters, egos, eyes, like so many parasites found in nature, thrive in darkness and abhor the light, precisely because it is only the light of consciousness that can be seen, that they can be seen and found guilty. Light-bearing in Latin is Lucifer. Lucifer is also morning star and is associated with Venus, love, charm, and Proto-Italic Venus, desire, who, as the goddess of love, and love is severity and mercy in balanced measure applied unconditionally with infinite wisdom, is the divine feminine, Mother Nature, the medium of reality on all dimensions, and the negating force required for all creation, destruction, evolution, and devolution in the universe. In this context, Lucifer is the torch held high in the right hand of Lady Columbia, the personification of the New World, the Americas, immortalized in the Statue of Liberty, on whose head sits a crown of 7 rays. This suggests our Divine Mother, working with our individual Lucifer, can help us gain liberty from the causes of suffering by illuminating the 7 deadly sins and raising our consciousness out of darkness into the light of the 7 heavenly virtues: chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, patience, kindness, and humility. Columbia comes from Christopher Columbus. According to a contributor to thoughtco.com, quote, the word Columbus means dove in Latin, and Christopher means Christ bearer. Serendipitously, the dove represents the Holy Spirit, Binah on the tree of life of Kabbalah, which sits atop Boaz, the feminine pillar, columna in Latin, of severity. Christ is known as the light of the world, redeemer of our sins, the Son of God, the Father, Chokmah on the tree of life, which sits atop Jachin, the masculine pillar or columna. The masculine pillar or columna of mercy. Thus, the Christ bearer is one who bears the light of the world, which can redeem us of our sins and bring us peace through the Holy Spirit, the Divine Mother, Columbia, Lady Liberty. Lucifer, the torch in Columbia's right hand, is the light bearer. It should also be noted that Christopher, which means, there is a visual that we are working on to be included in this part of the chapter. So we should have Boaz and Jacqueline, the feminine, masculine. So in other words, tree of life, person, etc.
Yeah.
Self-explanatory, I think, from the text. Christ bearer also means that which bears the Christ. So that which bears the Christ into the world, she who bore the Christ into the world was Mary, the Virgin Mother of God, which is also the divine feminine. So this relationship is so intimate between these. The light bearer, Christ is the light of the world, and the light bearer is Lucifer. But Christ bearer is the Virgin Mother of God, the Divine Mother. So the connection between the light bearer and the Divine Mother is so intimate. And that's why Lady Liberty holds Lucifer in her right hand.
Yeah.
If Lucifer sheds light on, demonstrates, points out, makes conscious the causes of suffering, our eyes, egos, then it follows the linguistic relationship between Lucifer, demons, monsters, and desire morphed into the commonly understood association between Lucifer and the devil via the slow emergence of English from Latin and the other Proto-English languages over centuries of hand-copied texts, liberal translations, cultural exchanges, and many other circumstances. Esoterically, the fallen Lucifer as fallen angel, is associated with Satan. From the original Hebrew shaitan, pronounced shaitan, meaning adversary. Also, shaitan in Islam, devil or demon, shayateen, plural. As is implied, should the bearer of light, that which brings enlightenment to consciousness, fall under the spell of temptation, hypnosis, and fall into darkness, ignorance, then Lucifer no longer serves our consciousness, but the adversary, the singular I we identify as, the singular ego as understood by contemporary psychology, a single demon, the devil, Satan, which merely symbolizes the legion of individual psychological aggregates, egos, I's, sins, demons, or by whatever name, which cause suffering, hypnosis, and ignorance. In synthesis, if the light of our consciousness falls into darkness, is charmed by desire in any given moment, we identify with any one of a legion of I's. I am afraid, I am hungry, I am envious at all, and or their cravings and aversion. I want this, I don't want that. Our consciousness becomes hypnotized and ignorant of its true self, which is want for nothing. In other words, when Adam and Eve, humanity, were charmed by the serpent, symbolic of lust, the inverted sexual force, the mother of all desires, Satan, all egos, and ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, indulged lust, became identified with the resulting desires and their causes, each expressing itself as an I, their consciousness became hypnotized, ignorant of their true selves. Their consciousness can be said to have fallen asleep, cast out from the Garden of Eden, symbolic of the age when conscious human beings once lived in relative innocence, fully aware of the supernal dimensions of reality and their true nature as monads, divine vessels of being, the being in human being. Cast out of Eden and into the desert of suffering and hardship under the continued influence of egos, humanity became limited to physical experience of and through the four bodies of sin: mental, emotional, vital, and physical bodies. If the consciousness remains asleep, our mechanical lunar bodies are constantly influenced by the metaphorical singular embodiment and epitome of all evil, the cause of all suffering in the world, in microcosm and in macrocosm, our individual Satan, our ego, our I. Ego consciousness, then, is the very nature of psychological hell. In Buddhism, a spiritual philosophy, so in other words, up to this point, we basically outlined the classical Western and Judeo-Christian origins of and relationships between the classical Western philosophy and let's rephrase that. The Greco-Roman Western origins and Judeo-Christian origins of the relationship between ego and demons, the devil, Satan.
Yeah.
From here, we will go into the Eastern origins and relations between. So, for example, in Buddhism and in Hinduism and in other Eastern religions, that they arrived at the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Again, we are not trying to take a intellectual syllogistic approach, saying A plus B equals C, right? And B plus C equals D, ergo A equals D, or whatever whatever that kind of. We're not trying to take that kind of approach. Instead, we are trying to do what we said we were going to do, is reveal, like, turn over all these pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And try to find the corners. And try to find the edges that frame the big picture. And it is our hope that we will be doing this conscious kind of, it's almost like a contemplation or a meditation as opposed to being a didactic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we don't want to be didactic. We want to show, not tell.
Yeah.
And allow the synthesis to occur where the reader goes, they have that moment where they go, yeah, this is, and then as we continue forward, and then when they have that moment, or we help them along in having that moment, we then can turn back to these contemporary definitions of ego and start deconstructing them within the framework of this new revelation. The fact that we put all these puzzle pieces together, and they're all pointing to the same thing. And of course, we have a lot more that we're going to bring to bear into this conversation, including the manifestations of ego in, for example, computer systems. So how malware infects computer systems and how parasites affect biological systems. And that the nature and behavior of a parasite, and the nature and behavior of malware, and the nature and behavior of corporations as parasitic entities existing on the body of planet Earth, and using the Alm of Life, and using, like, we have that we've done all that in videos and so on. But we're really synthesizing a great many things, and we're pulling in from a great many in order to have this general overview and discussion of ego, because we have to have this as a foundation to be able to discuss fear, because fear is an ego, and not just any ego.
No, and fear is basically the power source for black magicians as well.
Well, it is because there is, you'll notice that there is no ego called control.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But that is exactly what fear is.
Yeah.
And you see, this is, and fear is, if you are familiar at all with our article, fear is the great chameleon,
Yeah.
right? And fear loves to disguise itself as other egos. And the whole point of, by the way, but for starters, I'll just throw this up here because Dylan made the
Oh,
comment.
yeah.
Looks so good. Looks good so far. The book. Don't be afraid to let your compassion and intensity shine through in your words, because that's what makes these live streams interesting, my friend. Oh well, we're glad to hear you say that, because we watched on the weekend. We needed a bit of a break from this, and we had a difficult day yesterday. Challenging day because we ran into an article about getting books published and whatnot. And it was a very discouraging article. Having said that, so one of the things that we did is we spent the weekend watching films by featuring Daniel Day-Lewis, who is, in some ways, we can say, the greatest living actor of our time, of our generation. In some ways, we can say he is the best black magician among actors of our generation.
Yeah. Who?
Because
What was his name again?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
So he played Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York, and he played Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood. He also played Chris. I can't remember the name of the individual, but he was also in My Left Foot, and he also played Lincoln in Steven Spielberg's film entitled Lincoln.
Okay.
And he won. He is the only person, the only man in history ever to win Best Actor 3 times. He's the only one to ever do that. And if you see the performances, if you see the films and you watch those performances, you say to yourself, well, obviously he was deserving of those Oscars. But Daniel Day-Lewis is a method actor, which means he is the greatest method actor of our generation. And method acting it's very, we don't know enough about it. I never studied method acting. I studied acting like a martial art. So I worked with chi, prana. I sculpted the living, breathing, flowing body of the Divine Mother in real time on stage. That's what I do. That's how I act. And I allow the divine inspiration in the words, in the text, and to flow through me, through my innermost. And Attlas does the acting. The method is the opposite of that, insofar as the method constructs the alter ego of the character that's being portrayed. But the effect of that is it creates a very powerful and very real portrayal, because it's not so much a portrayal anymore.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
Or it's as real as it's going to get. And there's a very, Master Samael had some choice words to say about actors, about how actors allow basically themselves to become possessed by demons.
Yeah.
And there have been stories, for example, of Heath Ledger, who played the Joker in The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
He was given the Oscar for that role, and it was accepted on his behalf because he had killed himself by then.
Yeah.
He never received the Oscar for that role, and there was much talk of how he created such a persona in the Joker that it took such a toll on him. And Daniel Day-Lewis, after he played Bill the Butcher, he took 5 years off from acting.
Yeah.
And that not so much that he couldn't get the character out. And he admits to this, by the way. He admits to this. He says, people have it all wrong. He says, for me, it's not that I can't get these characters out of my head or whatever. He says, it's not about that. He says, it's about, I don't want to let go of them. I don't want to let go. I put so much time and effort and energy into creating, into allowing these characters to come into me and bringing them to life, that at the end of the shoot, when my work is done and all the film goes to the editing bay, I have this overwhelming depression that comes over me. He says, what, for that? I did all that work and all that effort and all that time and all that sacrifice and all that everything for that? For 2.5 hours on the screen? That's it? And I'm not even in all of those 2.5 hours. I'm in a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here. And so he feels this tremendous melancholy that he has to now let go of this alter ego that he's created. But he also expressed that this whole process, his work, the work, which according to him he loves to do, he absolutely loves the work because he says that it's fueled by his curiosity. His curiosity makes him dive deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into these personas, into these characters, and so much so that he wants to know them from the inside out. And he allows them to come he like fuses with them because he wants to know these characters from the inside out. Now, is there an element of black magic here? Is there playing with, dancing with the devil, playing with fire, whatever, there is something about the fact that Daniel Day-Lewis, there's something about the roles that he chose, or rather the roles that were chosen for him, the roles that he refused to do, the fact that he refused to live in Hollywood, the fact that he took on a trade after he did Bill the Butcher, Gangs of New York, he went to Italy and he learned how to become a cobbler, a shoemaker. And he was making shoes, leather shoes, from scratch for 5 years. And in other times, he's done other things like blacksmithing and carpentry, and because it's like he needs, in my intuition on this, okay, my instruction on this point is that Daniel Day-Lewis is a very, very, very unique exception to typical actors and acting.
Yeah.
And that he is following the guidance of his innermost as he goes and he does these explorations. He doesn't fall in love with these characters. He doesn't allow the characters to possess them. On the contrary, he seeks experiential knowledge of the demons which occupy and motivate these characters.
Yeah, the darkness, basically.
Yeah, exactly. He's dancing with the devil. It's true. He's dancing with the devil, no question. But he is so careful and cautious and reverent. And when they ask him, well, how do you make these decisions? And how do you make those decisions? And how did you make this decision on screen and so on? He says, I don't know. He says clearly, somewhere in my conscious mind, decisions are being made, but I'm not the one making them.
Yeah.
I'm allowing, right?
Yeah, I can basically relate to that because sometimes it feels like I'm basically in the same position.
We all are. We all are. Just as I'm not choosing these words, I'm not making decisions about these words.
Yeah.
These are I'm simply, and I have been on stage. I have acted. Now the difference is I was not a method actor, but what I allowed myself to do, and that's why my favorite thing to do was act Shakespeare. Because the energy and the direction and everything, the words on the page informed the performance. So the decisions that were being made and the way in which everything, it just all flowed from the text. So in a way, you're allowing the logos to move you and motivate you and direct you and guide you and make the decisions for you. And you are being a vessel. You are being a puppet. You are allowing these forces to move you. And I imagine that Daniel Day-Lewis's methodology is not much different, except he's going about it from a different, because let's face it, he's going from a bottom up way, and the rest, everybody who's acting, even the way I act, the acting as a martial art, right? We're going from the top down. No matter how we slice it, we're going from the top down. Except that's from our perspective as an actor. When you connect to your center, as the Lascomian method teaches you how to do, you are allowing, and you allow the text to inform you, and you allow your center and the energy to come up through you. You're allowing your innermost being to do the acting.
Yeah.
And so this is where the two meet. Two very, very, very different methodologies. But the best actor is the one who keeps digging down, and allows their innermost being, the truth, God's truth, the logos, the word of God, the light, the truth, to come through them out onto the world, onto the world of the stage, onto the world of the screen, into the world through them. This is all great artists and poets and writers and avatars, teachers, prophets. This is the work, to bring the light of the world through us into the world. And that's why the method acting is not, strictly speaking, black magic. You know who does black magic is Joe Biden, right? And the politicians. They do black magic because they're manipulating, right? But they're pretending to be real.
Yeah.
There is no understanding that, hey, this is a performance. This is not a real person. So we might ask the question, well, why do something like this? Well, like on the weekend, why did we do this? To recharge our batteries. Anytime we need to recharge our batteries, I need to recharge my batteries. I need help defeating the demon that's bubbling up with fear again, and doubt and discouragement and depression and all these things. I turn to expressions of the logos. And those expressions of the logos can be a whole movie like Forrest Gump, right? Robert Zemeckis' film, Forrest Gump, which is such a beautiful film in so many ways. It has so many beautiful scenes in it that or it can be Gladiator. It can be an entire film like that, or it can just be watching someone who has dedicated and devoted their life to the craft, the work. And Daniel Day-Lewis calls it the work. That's what he calls it. He never calls it acting. He never calls it the method. He only calls it the work. That is the only way he ever describes it. And he talks about his love for the work. In the same way that we love what we do. This intensity that Dylan talks about, that he wants to see embodied in what we write, is exactly why we need to be able to take breaks, and we need to be able to step away and put ourselves and remind ourselves of how much we love what we do. Dylan says, when an actor embodies a character, it becomes a personality disorder for most, because they lose track of who's who and what's real. Embodying the Holy Spirit shows you who you are. Again, people who practice the method, they have to construct and create this character. And once they're in this character, they have to remain in character for the duration of the performance, the duration of the shoot, or whatever. Now, the problem with that is that some of these actors, they really don't know what they're doing, or they've really taken it too far, or they don't have the reverence, and they're playing with fire. They're dancing with the devil. And if you dance with the devil and you don't know what you're doing, if you allow the devil to lead, that's a problem. Look at your own life. Observe yourself. What happens when you let your egos lead? Anything good? Right? So it's the same thing for a method actor who's creating an alter ego and a persona and a personality. Surely, in the moment, on stage, on screen, demons have to be allowed to express themselves. Surely. That's because then what's the point? In the same way that our Divine Mother works to bring about circumstances that cause our demons to rise to the surface and express themselves. Why? Because surely we have to experience that. Surely. We must. It has to happen. And that's the razor's edge that we walk on. Because how can we know our egos? How can we comprehend our fear if we haven't experienced it? So how can Daniel Day-Lewis explore the truth of these characters and reveal that to us if he himself is not experiencing it? In the same way that when we're on stage and we're performing Shakespeare, the way we perform it, we are allowing the text to create for us our experience. The divine logos, which inspired Count Saint Germain, who was Sir Francis Bacon, who was Will Shakespeare. Count Saint Germain wrote the plays of Shakespeare, in other words, and the King James Bible, because Sir Francis Bacon was Count Saint Germain. And so the logos is in the text. And when you practice acting as a martial art, you're working with energy and you're connected to your own center, your own innermost. Now, the energy, the light, the truth that's in the text, you are connected to an individuated essence of that light and truth, that source, the logos. So this, it all connects and it creates this circuit. And now you are experiencing the light and the truth of the logos as embodied in that character, as that character is a living, breathing expression of it. And the words you are speaking are a living, breathing expression of it. It's just that stage acting and film acting are very different. And writing for the stage, certainly, Shakespeare, there's no question. There's nothing else like Shakespeare. And Shakespeare needs to be performed this way, in the same way that all ancient theater needs to be performed as a martial art. That's why the Greeks called it amphitheater, right? To amplify the truth and the light and the energy that's in the text, that's in the source, that's being kindled and brought out onto the stage in the actors, and then amplified through the audience and all the energies that are being accumulated in that in the amphitheater and resonated there to create a heightened experience. So what Plato said to facilitate catharsis. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but so we do this. It's a beautiful thing to witness people living their purpose, living their alignment with their innermost being, and seeing the fruits of their labor. It's inspiring. And if we have a block, if we have difficulty, if we have challenges, the other one of the films that we watched, by the way, was Lincoln. Of course, it stars Daniel Day-Lewis as Abraham Lincoln. That's number one. But number two, the film is talking about getting the 13th Amendment through the House of Representatives. This colossal, monumental, impossible task for Lincoln to do before the end of the war. And the brilliant way in which Daniel Day-Lewis was able to embody the man. When you listen to Steven Spielberg talk about the filming of Lincoln, he did not refer to any of the actors by their real name. for the entire duration of the shoot. Everyone, at all times, Spielberg treated them as their historical characters. And he never, ever, ever spoke to Daniel Day-Lewis without referring to him as Mr. President. And it's incredible because I've been on movie sets, right? So I know what they're like. And even Daniel Day-Lewis and Spielberg, when they were talking about the and all the actors, when they were talking about the mood on the set of Lincoln, they said they'd never seen anything like it before on a movie set. Nobody was talking in between takes. Everybody was, there was such a solemnity on the set of Lincoln. It was almost as if it was almost as if they all knew what they were doing was some kind of sacred duty or sacred honor. There was such reverence to the men and women that they were portraying in this part of American history. This is one of the most crucial, important events in the whole of American history. And
Yeah.
Lincoln to them is a godlike figure. And so it's incredible when one allows one's work and the gravitas of it.
Yeah, just like John Williams, basically, he who made music for Star Wars and such. He is such a person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, there you go. There's someone who, if you've ever seen him in interviews,
Yeah,
you know that he is like George Lucas. Okay, he comes across as the most mild-mannered, like humble person.
Yeah.
Like he's not he's not one that seems to seek the spotlight or he just and everything when he sits down, all great movie composers, they serve the story, they serve the script, they serve the images on the screen.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg tells the story of when John Williams came in and because John Williams composed the music for Jaws.
Yeah.
And remember, just Spielberg talks about that he comes in and it's
Yeah.
And Spielberg's like, what? That's it? Right? And he had to, John Williams said, well, hang on, wait a minute, it gets better.
Yeah.
What would Jaws be without that soundtrack? Without that score?
Yeah.
Right? What would it be? What would Star Wars be? What would Indiana Jones be? What would the musicians who recognize that they are, again, the artist, the real artist serves the truth.
Yeah.
Right? That's why in the past artists had a muse. And their muse was their divine mother. The true artists like Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci painted his divine mother. His Mona Isis, his Mona Lisa. His Mona Lisa, that's his divine mother. And Beethoven wrote love letters to his immortal beloved. His immortal beloved. and pining for her, and pining and longing to be one with her again, and to be together with her again. His muse, his everything, his immortal beloved. This is that reverence, that dedication, devotion, passion. That's why these words, devotion and passion and dedication, are so often related to relationships as they are to art or to one's purpose for being. Because they're all related to the divine feminine, whose body we sculpt or paint or put into vibration with our musical instruments and our musical notation, right? We are literally sculpting, painting, making music with, cooking. Doesn't matter what we do. We are affecting and bringing the divine mind of God, the divine mind of the Logos, the Manas, into manifestation through the body of the Divine Mother. Our muse, through our loyalty, devotion, dedication, and passion to that process of impregnating her and giving birth to something new and real and vibrant, and an expression, a manifestation of truth, a manifestation of love, a manifestation of the light, of the Logos, the living, breathing Word of God made flesh. That's what the path of the Bodhisattva is. To make this flesh a living, breathing embodiment of the Logos, of the divine mind of being. But everybody in their own way, in their own small way, no matter what level they are at, a servant can do this. A housekeeper can do this. A carpenter, a construction worker can do this. It is much, much, much harder for someone on an assembly line to do this. And this is what Charlie Chaplin was so desperate to try to immortalize in his film Modern Times, because he saw that. He saw that the humanity is taken out in the industrialized process, in the industrialization, in the assembly line, where people just become another cog in the machine. And this is also expressed by Tolkien. Tolkien, who he despised industrialization and the Industrial Revolution, and he embodied that in the Two Towers, in Saruman, and the creation of the Uruk-hai army of Saruman, and he cuts down Fangorn Forest and to build the machinery of war. Because there is no beauty, there is no muse in an assembly line, right? It's just,
yeah, I agree.
Right? Now, you can still do your work diligently and be productive and everything else, but honestly, can you compare the life of a cobbler who maybe spends all day making a pair of shoes, but at the end of the day, he looks at these pair of shoes that at the beginning of the day was nothing but some pieces of leather and some thread and some rubber, maybe. And then all day, and then at the end, he has created something from nothing. Can you compare that to working in a factory where you spend all afternoon doing something and then you look at a bin and it's filled with stuff, and yeah, you made those, but you only did one little part or whatever, and then you just, I don't know. It's not. It's not the same. It can't be the same. So that's and coming back briefly to Daniel Day-Lewis and this importance of being able to take breaks. He says that after he does a particularly intensive period of work, he needs that break because he feels like a field which has gone fallow, meaning the soil has been depleted and he can't grow anything in it anymore for the time being. He has to wait and grow something else in that field. He needs to allow that field to become replenished. And honestly, in no uncertain terms, us shoveling the snow for an hour and a half this morning really, really felt like that. It really gave us a feeling of satisfaction. We cleared the snow for one of our neighbors from her driveway, and it really, we had a productive morning, but it was also physical labor, right? No mind involved, no heart involved.
Yeah.
Let give these a rest, because when we do these talks or when we work on our stuff, right, it's this does all the work.
Yeah.
So that's why doing that physical activity. We also have a forest that we go, and on the weekend, it was a beautiful sunny day. It was cold. It was minus 20 degrees Celsius on Saturday. Yesterday was only minus 5. But we went for a long walk, an hour and a half walk, hike through the woods, and we got some new spikes for our boots, to go on the ice, and and in the sunshine, and we go to the dog park, and the dogs come, and we get to, and it's we need that, right? We need to unplug and do something else, and using different centers, or using our centers in a different way. So clean the house, make dinner, do something, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it's because we cannot abuse our centers, right? We must be, and this is the other problem, by the way, with that industrialized work, where somebody does the same thing for 8 hours a day. Because if it's mindless, okay, then it's just physical labor for 8 hours a day. But if they're doing the same thing, like working on a computer 8 hours a day, and yeah, they get to have a little break here and there or whatever, but it's like an abuse of that center.
Yeah.
We need the ability to step back, take a break, take a breath, recharge, refresh, use a different center. Allow, go and watch. I mean, I admit that, for me, Lincoln is, even if the truth about the Civil War and the truth about the abolishment of slavery and all this kind of stuff is not how the history books remember it. And what we see in Lincoln is a very superficial, kind of sentimental view of history. For me, it doesn't matter so much. I'm not interested in the historical accuracy of it. To me, it's just a good story. And Lincoln as a character, and the way he was portrayed, and the way and the spirit in which that story of history is being told. It's a mythology. And it's beautiful. The struggle for freedom and the lengths to which good men were willing to go, and what they were willing to do, and what they were willing to sacrifice, and the compromises they were willing to make for what was such an important event of history. Again, regardless of what the real truth was and the machinations behind the scene and all the rest of it, there was something monumental taking place at that time in history. And these men, mostly men, were playing their part and were doing what they felt in their heart they needed to do. And so all of those men who made this a reality, it was the Logos who was working through them. The hand of God working through, but it's not, but the hand of God doesn't have 5 fingers. The hand of God has billions. And here and now on this planet, we are now what? 8 billion.
Yeah.
8 billion tendrils. 8 billion fingertips of the hand of God. And it's another reason why we have to do these live streams and why they're so important to us. Because we have to allow the narrative and the story to flow through us and take us like the river takes the water. Because now we have another beautiful expression and a beautiful thing to be able to put into the book. That you, dear reader, whether you realize it or not, are one of those fingers. We all are. We all have that potential. We all have that capacity, that ability to be that. And the only thing standing in the way of that is our fear, is our need to be in control.
Or to control.
Or to control others.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But again, that's need to be in control is the same, right? It's
yeah.
Right? So, but this is why this work is so important, and it may be. Now we will try to find representation, and we will try to seek, publication through a traditional publisher. But if we do not, it may be that our only recourse will be to self-publish. In which case, we've been looking at that, and the reality of that is that if we hope to self-publish this book and have it make any impact whatsoever, we need to make some changes to our YouTube and to our social media presence. We need to somehow, don't know how exactly we're going to do this. We need to become active on Twitter, probably have much more active on Instagram, much more active on YouTube, and not just be doing these live streams, but actually begin doing 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute videos again, and creating content on a much more regular basis, and content which is accessible to the normies. And all of this we need to be able to do so that we can start building up that following, because that will also will also have a significant impact on a potential publisher, in their belief in our ability to promote the book and that we have a following. So in that sense, one of the things that we're going to start asking people to do is to like and subscribe us on YouTube if you haven't already, and also to consider sharing on social media platforms more. But also we are going to try to give people more material to work with. We're going to try to produce more content. We have so much content on the blog, so much content that what we've done in the past. Now it's a matter of restructuring that and breaking it up into more bite-sized portions and working with it in a more, again, being a little bit more, compromising a little bit more, being a little bit more cognizant of the Twitter world that we live in, where everybody wants everything in sort of bite-sized portions. Everybody wants a tweet, right? And so that's something that we have to become more cognizant about and more proactive in reaching out and increasing our it's terrible because you don't want followers. It's not followers, and yet the numbers are what count, right? It's a case of mathematics.
It's the impact, basically.
Sorry?
It's the impact that
it's the impact, and yeah, and it's the practicality of it, right?
Yeah.
It's the practicality of it. And we have an unprecedented tool at our disposal. We have these unprecedented networks available to us, and we have the tools, right? We have the ability, we have the skill, well, to one degree or another when it comes to making videos and such, but to do animations, and we have the software, we have the hardware, right? So now it's really a matter of becoming more disciplined a little bit and more structured, perhaps, in saying, you know what, every day, okay, these live streams, we're doing them 3 times a week, but in addition to that, we have to be able to do at least 2 other videos a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? Maybe it's a 5-minute, 10-minute video on something, right? Something. And again, maybe we have to find that inspiration on Facebook or however, if we find that inspiration, and maybe we need to make at least 1 meme or something, or a couple memes a week that we put out on Instagram and put on Facebook and put on Twitter. And all of these link back to whatever property we're doing. And we have to think in the broader terms of what exactly is the brand that we are going to be pushing forward and moving forward. And then, of course, it's also the blog, because we haven't written a blog article in a long time. And are we going to shift from making them long essays back and doing what a proper blog is these short, punchy articles on a very specific topic? And should be making those, and should be using what's in the news to talk about those topics, and associating it so that perhaps there's better search engine optimization and all these. These are all these kind of practical things that we're going to be having conversations, particularly with a close friend of ours who has the advertising agency and knows a little bit more about all this social media stuff. Anyway, I want to thank you, Azazel, for sticking around. You are now the only participant, I think.
Yeah.
I think and Dylan. I think Dylan's still around. But I want to thank you guys for joining us. Is there anything you guys want to mention or ask, or before we call it a day?
Yeah, no, I think we covered everything for today, at least, so I'm satisfied.
And I also want to encourage you to, if there's anything, the Atlas Project is not a one-man show.
No.
It's not a one-man show. So if there's anything that if you feel that there's a contribution you would like to make, or think you might want to make, or something of some kind, whatever that may be, then by all means, we are open to that, because we know that the work that we're here to do, we can't do it alone, and we're not here to try to do it alone. And that's one of the reasons why we want our live streams to be able to be open for people to participate. And the Atlas Project is it's an open stage.
Yeah.
And those who, this is really, as we've discussed in the past, we're building an ark here. And that ark has to be built metaphysically before it can be built physically.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to make an impact and demonstrate to the world that there is something that we know and something that we possess that they need. Dylan says we need to share the streams in other groups and to others, the more the merrier. And what I need to do is I need to cut shorter versions of them, or I need to be able to take what we talk about and make like 5 or 10 or 15-minute videos and release those on Tuesdays and Thursdays that perhaps synthesize and crystallize with clarity very specific subjects, very specific videos, because those are the ones that get traction and get replay. Because live streams might be good on one level, but for YouTube, for the algorithm and for whatnot, and so their YouTube does not like live streams in terms of, because they like scripted recorded content, because that's what they can sell advertising on. And we would have to get to, I believe the number is 5,000 subscribers on YouTube to be able to become monetized. So without that, then we can't receive any ad revenue for our work on YouTube. And that's another thing to consider. I mean, just from a practical point of view, right? Because that's one of the reasons why we're writing the book, is to trying to figure out a way that we can continue doing our work and start generating some income, because we need that to be able to apply it to the other projects that we're trying to get off the ground. So, but in any case, thank you again so much for being a part of tonight's live stream. And we hope to see you again soon.
Yeah.
So, inferential peace, and have a good night.